So object relations theory is a more modern approach to psychoanalytic treatment. And there are lots of people that are involved in this approach to helping individuals. One of them, probably the person that may be most responsible, is Melanie Klein, here seated. Um, Also, Margaret Mahler, who was very influential in attachment theory that we'll talk about in a few minutes. John Bowlby, another attachment theorist from England. Mary Ainsworth, another attachment theorist. So attachment's very important. Harry Harlow, that was at the University of Wisconsin, attachment theorist. Heinz Kohut, a therapist who made his claim to fame working with some of the more difficult personality disorders like borderline and narcissistic personality disorder. Benjamin Spock, an early attachment theorist. Believe it or not, many people before Spock and some of these attachment theorists believe that it was not possible to work with people with personality disorders. It was impossible to, it was possible to love a child too much. And these baby psychologists came along and took that to task. And then, of course, probably one of our favorites, Fred Rogers, who single-handedly changed how we, in the modern world, in Western culture, deal with children. So object relations theory is interesting, and it's based on careful observation of young children. So while Freud emphasized the first 4 to 6 years of life, object relations theorists like Klein emphasized the first 4 to 6 months. They placed emphasis on the child's infant drives like hunger, sex, etc., and that these drives are directed at an object such as a breast, a penis, a vagina, or other objects. Again, keep in mind, these are psychoanalysts, so it's still the sex drive. The big difference is the time period. The child's relation to that object is fundamental and serves as a prototype for all later relations to whole objects like mother and father. Incidentally, this is where attachment theory comes in, because just as with object relations, attachment theory lays down a template for relationships. The very early tendency of infants to relate to partial objects gives their experience an unrealistic or fantasy-like quality that affects all their interpersonal relations in adulthood. Klein's ideas tend to shift the focus from psychoanalytic theory from organically based stages of development to the role of early fantasy in the formation of interpersonal relationships. Margaret Mahler believed that children's sense of identity rests upon a three-step relationship with their mother. Not the father, but the mother. First, infants have a basic need to be cared for by the mother. Second, they develop a safe symbiotic relationship with an all-powerful mother. And third, the child emerges from the mother's protective circle and establishes their own separate individuality. In general, Mahler's work was concerned with the infant's struggle to gain autonomy and a sense of self. Attachment theorists like Kohut, Bowlby, Ainsworth, and others emphasize early attachment behavior. And of course, that's where Harry Harlow came in. Remember the research he did on attachment in rhesus monkeys, preferring a warm, cuddly, nurturing wire monkey or fur-covered monkey to a bottle-feeding wire monkey. They want the contact comfort. So Heinz Kohut theorized that children develop a sense of self during early infancy when parents and others treat them as if they were they had an individualized sense of identity. So he's trying to reintegrate, especially the borderline personality disorder. He was extensively involved in those. And to some extent, his psychoanalytic approach is still very actively used today. John Bowlby investigated infants' attachment to their mothers as well as the negative consequences of being separated. Remember, this is where Harlow came in. Mary Ainsworth and colleagues developed a technique for measuring the type of attachment style that infants develop toward caretakers, like attached, insecure, unattached. And these developmental psychologists were the first in a long series of what we know as baby psychologists, including Harlow, Benjamin Spock, and even our beloved Mr. Rogers. So object relations in a nutshell is a theory, as an offspring of Freud's instinct theory, yet it is different in some important ways. Object theory, relations theory places emphasis on the biological-based drives and more importance on consistent patterns of interpersonal relations, while Freud's theory is paternalistic, that is father-oriented, emphasizing power and controlling father. Object relations theory tends to be more maternal, stressing the intimacy and nurturing of the mother. Object relations theory generally sees human contact and relatedness, not sexual pleasure, as a prime motivator of human behavior. Some of the critique of this is that it solely focuses on the mother and child relationship. The whole relationship is focused on fending off anxiety, fears of annihilation, and fears of abandonment. This theory rates high on the measure of determinism versus free will. That is, that it's kind of set down beforehand, so your past really determines where you're at in the present. Object relation theory can be pessimistic or optimistic depending on the quality of the relationship and, of course, the amount of pathology. Healthy relationships produce a psychologically healthy child. Unhealthy relationships produce a pathological self-absorbed personality, or things, some of the ones we'd see in the DSM-5. Object relations theory tends to be more causal than teleological. That is, remember, teleological is more future-oriented, as early relationships are seen as causing or shaping personality. And finally, this approach is highly unconscious because all the theorists trace determinants of behavior to early infancy before language. 4 to 6 months, kids don't talk. So it's very deterministic. Because Klein placed emphasis on death, instinct, and phylogenetic endowment like Freud did, emphasis is placed more on the biological rather than the environmental forces. However, the relation with mother-child is environmental, and this theory leans toward emphasizing social determinants of behavior. Finally, object relations theory emphasizes the similarities between people, unlike Freud. Most of this discussion of these approaches emphasizes the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships and little understanding of what a healthy personality is. So in other words, it's good at detecting when there's pathology, but what are the characteristics of a healthy personality? And that's it. Be sure to check out the learning material in the course information folder.